We now test that PS2 core with a mouse or a keyboard. But before I start, I want to see where is that PS2 on the Nexus board we have. And if you take a look around, there's actually no PS2 port anywhere on the board. What it has actually, it has a USB type A in here. And we can connect a keyboard or a mouse in here. And if you take a look at it, it says USB host. So how can I use a USB mouse or a keyboard as PS2? Well, as it turns out that this particular board utilizes a little microcontroller in here, which is PIC24F, and that particular microcontroller has a couple of functionalities. So when it first starts, it can read the code from an SD card or actually a USB thumb drive that is connected to that USB. It can read the bit file and load it to the FPGA, and after it gets loaded, it switches to a different mode. And in that mode, it will actually act as an emulator for PS2. So what it will do, it will actually connect or translate USB signals from the USB or keyboard in here into PS2. And these PS2, the two wires, the PS2 clock and the PS2 data, are wired directly to the FPGA underneath in here. So in order for us to actually utilize this, we need to use a keyboard or a USB keyboard or a USB mouse. However, if you take a look at the documentation of the documentation in here, for example, let me just see that. So if you take a look at the documentation or the reference manual for the Nexus 4, it tells you the following. So these are important in here. So it says that that USB type A connector actually does not support hub. So hub support is not available yet. Okay, so you can only connect a single mouse or a single keyboard. You can't connect a hub and connect a bunch of them, even though USB allows it. It's just because the emulator works this way. And only keyboards am I supporting the boot HID interface are supported. Which means that not every mouse or USB mouse and USB keyboard can work. And as lucks have it, actually, my keyboard does not work because it does not support this particular interface. Anyhow, so we're gonna move into the checking some of the test function in here, and this particular test function shows me the following. So it shows me that it does basically take the PS2 check. It actually defines a few variables: the left button, right button, X move, and Y move for the mouse, and then the character for a keyboard. If you connect a keyboard, that works. Okay. So we take a look at it. There's last, and I'll show you what last does in a few seconds. Actually, the first thing it does is actually it shows me whether I connected a mouse or a keyboard using the initialization function. So what it'll do, it'll actually initialize that PS2 core, and during the initialization, if you remember, it returns a number. If it's 1, it's a keyboard. If it's 2, it's a mouse. If it's a negative number, there was a problem. And then we display it on the UART. And then we take some sort of a time in here, and then inside it, basically I keep repeating as long as there's a change on the mouse of the keyboard. This is the purpose of this do while in here. As long as there's a change on the mouse or the keyboard, I'll keep displaying these changes on the mouse or the keyboard. However, if you pause for exactly 5 seconds and you don't do anything, it will just basically terminate this particular test, and it will just tells me that I'm gonna exit the PS2 test, and that's the purpose of this last and MS. So last is just tells me the last minute or the last second that I was in, and I'll store the current one, and if I don't change anything, I'm not gonna update it. So if you basically compare it to the current time and it's like basically less than 5 seconds, it'll keep repeating. I'll keep repeating. After 5 seconds, I'll just break out of it. Anyway, that's the purpose for the last here. If you take a look at what's inside the do while loop, it's actually figured out with the ID. The ID is the one that we read here from the initialization. If it's a 1, it's a keyboard. If it's a 2, it's a mouse. So this one here is a test for the mouse. So what does the test for the mouse do? I know it's a mouse, so I need to utilize the mouse function. So I'm going to get the mouse activity. I'll figure out the left button, right button, X move, and Y move, and then I'll just display it on the UART. However, if it wasn't 2, that means it's a keyboard. That means I need to do these things in here. So what is this? It's actually just go and read the character that was pressed. And that character could be anything. It could be uppercase or lowercase or something like that. And that's about it. That's how the test function is. So let's move to the board and actually just see how this particular function works. So I'll start by connecting a mouse, and now my console here is open and it keeps returning -1, -1. It's trying to initialize something and it's giving me -1. If you remember from the driver, a negative number indicates a problem, and that problem is actually that there's nothing that is acknowledging. So what I'll do is I'll just basically go and connect my USB mouse in here. So that's basically the USB mouse that I connected, and now I can wait a little bit in here. Generally speaking, you need to connect it before the system works, and there you go, before it initializes. So initialize it to 2, and now every single time I move it or I do something, it'll actually just report these changes. For example, as long as it's changing, it's going to report something. If you wait for 5 seconds, it's just not going to report anything. I'm just going to press, well, it timed out because I waited for 5 seconds, and then it goes back again, it initializes it, it's actually number 2, which is a mouse, and then it timed out and so forth. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually change it. I'm going to do left button, and if you can see, it's actually now the button is pressed, the button is not pressed, the button is pressed, the button is not pressed. The same goes with the right in here, okay? And if I move upwards, I basically have, I'm trying to do this here. So I'm going to move up, up, up. Hopefully, I don't know why it's getting a negative number. I guess I'm moving to the negative direction. Well, I can do this, and you can see what's happening. It's actually changing. So technically, if you, let me just stabilize it a little bit. If I move it to the left in here, it's actually changing and changing and changing. Remember, those are relatives. So if I stop, it's going to be 0, and it's going to go again. If I go down, if I go downwards, I'm getting a negative number. If I go to that, I'm going to get a negative number. If I go that way, I'm going to get positive numbers, and so forth. So the mouse actually works. So now we're going to wait a little bit in here. I'm actually going to disconnect my mouse a little bit, and I'm just going to show you the keyboard that I have. So I do have this particular keyboard in here, which is from Dell. And I'm just going to connect it, and you can see what's going to happen. So my initialization function is actually, as it turns out, it actually does not even acknowledge anything in here. I'm going to just do a CPU reset in here. So it's going to do initialization. It's just doing -1. So it just doesn't work.